Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is unpacking cargo theft, trends and solutions with my friend Danielle Spinelli. How's it going, Danielle?
Going good. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you about this topic. So important, so important. So Danielle, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yeah. So I'm Danielle Spinelli. I work for Descartes MyCarrierPortal, and I am in Georgia.
So Descartes MyCarrierPortal. Now, I've heard of both those companies. I didn't know they were one and the same now. So first off, what is MyCarrierPortal?
Yes, we are a vetting and onboarding solution. So it was MyCarrierPackets back in the day. A lot of people know us still as that. Then we were MyCarrierPortal, and then we just got acquired by Descartes back in September.
So what does MyCarrierPortal do?
So basically, whenever you're looking up a carrier, you're talking to them on the phone, emailing them, about to cover a load with them, you're able to plug in their DOT MC and see right away, can I work with this carrier? Can I not? Do they have red flags? Do they meet my standards? Do they have the right type of insurance? Kind of whatever your standards are with your type of freight, you're able to customize that and then just really see whatever are the red flags. And then that way be able to determine, if you do want to work with them, send them a contract, and that's all done online. We monitor their insurance and take care of that whole beginning piece of them, and then keep you guys up to date where if something changes and, maybe they end up getting their FMCSA information changed, or they do have a bad report put in on them, you're able to get notifications and like, hey, now this guy was good, but now maybe something happened and, took a wrong turn and don't work with them anymore. Yeah.
I remember years ago, for a short time, I worked for a carrier, great company. And every time I would talk to a broker or a 3PL or anyone, they would always say, hey, we have this carrier. Can you give us a carrier packet? They would send some information that I was supposed to fill out. And I remember thinking, boy, I do a lot of filling out paperwork, right? And I was like a week in, and I talked to the guy who owned or one of the senior management of the trucking company. And I go, God, I spend like hours filling out this paperwork. He goes, don't fill out any paperwork till they give you business.
True.
And I was like, and I remember thinking, this is such a time waste for me. So I'm assuming the MyCarrierPackets and then later MyCarrierPortal were saying, yeah, it is a waste of time. And I felt like a lot of times when you're talking to brokers, they were just collecting carriers. There's somebody who says, oh, we have 15,000 carriers we work with. Meanwhile, you write 300 checks every month.
Yeah. Well, and really nowadays, since everything's digitalized and it only takes a carrier like 1 to 5 minutes to finish, they're just clicking. It helps you increase your network. So that way you can live within your network, not having to rely on load boards. And knowing all their information up front. But yeah, like you said, I dealt with having to send PDF packets to carriers, and they would have to print it off at a truck stop and pay for each page, fill it out, send it back in. That took, an hour sometimes. So definitely a long process.
So you mentioned Descartes. So Descartes bought MyCarrierPortal?
Yes, they acquired us in September. So I was at MyCarrierPortal about a year and a half prior, and then now part of the Descartes family the last 6 months. So now part of the MacroPoint, Aljax, the 190 other softwares that they have. But yeah, so it's fun.
They are a juggernaut.
Oh my gosh. So, and they just purchased 3G. So they like to purchase some companies, but they definitely do their due diligence in finding the right ones to get. So it's cool to be part of it.
Well, I know them a little bit because from having on the podcast and seeing them at conferences, and it seems like they do a good job of integrating. So a friend of mine who was on the podcast said, he goes, Joe, I left, I think he was a part of MacroPoint. And he said, when we got bought by Descartes, he goes, I thought I'd leave right away. He goes, I never wanted to leave. He goes, I loved it there. He ended up starting his own biz. Anyway, you're doing a webinar. And we talked the other day about the webinar you're doing. I wrote it down. Combating Strategic Cargo Theft, Stories from the CHP, California Highway Patrol. And that is April 24th. We'll make sure we put a link to that in the show notes so people can come to that webinar. But tell us briefly about that webinar. We're going to get into more detail in a little bit, but some detail. Tell us a little bit about the webinar.
I'm honestly so excited about it. So I met the California Highway Patrol. It's the California Highway Patrol Cargo Theft Task Force. There's only 4 guys that handle all of Southern Cal, which is wild because California is, the number one state that gets hit with cargo theft. But I met them. They were telling me all these crazy stories. I mean, just the things that they experience and how they're catching these guys is so wild to me. And so I was like, hey, how can I get you on? Like, everybody needs to know these stories. Everybody needs to see what you guys are dealing with, because I think there's a big misconception and like stuff getting stolen and people just thinking there's nothing they can do about it. Oh man, I have to pay this claim and whatever. But it's nice to hear that there are people that are combating it. So that's kind of where this whole thing came into play. I want them to tell their stories, kind of also give tips and tricks on how what we can do as brokers or in the industry to try to combat this on our end, and then kind of tailing it off with having the TIA government affairs guy Daniel hop on and like a call to action. Us as regular Americans, what can we do? Because there's not enough.
Right.
There's not enough. Really, like when I was talking to the officers, are like, yeah, I'll arrest somebody, and a couple weeks later they're back out again. There's not enough strict laws, I guess, to keep them away from doing the same thing over and over and over again. So
Yes. And you said something to me the other day that just really hit home. I said freight fraud, and then you said cargo theft. And you said something like, it's not just when we say freight fraud, we kind of forget that it was fraud so they could steal our stuff.
right.
And it's not just stealing trucks or stealing trailers, that you guys are getting into all of the stuff that's happening with rail and containers. I mean, this is a problem that is all across the supply chain.
It's wild. And even like our cost of goods, just, as Americans, our cost is going up really because of that. I mean, these big companies are not just taking the loss, otherwise they would be a lot better about, protecting their cargo. They're really just hiking up our prices. So I think it's important for us to know, how we fix this, and then, giving our officers as well, like tools. Hey, if this does happen, this is all the information I collected, helping them be able to find these guys too.
Yeah, it reminds me. Many years ago when I worked in automotive early in my career, and in product development, we came up with all sorts of anti-theft stuff. So it was harder and harder to steal cars. So what did the thieves move to? Carjacking, because that found the weak link was when you're in the car. If somebody points a gun at you, you get out of your car and give it to them. And I feel like to some extent we've made, not California because they legalized shoplifting a while ago. I think they've gone back on that, but shoplifting is hard now because you have all these cameras. We've made it more difficult. You can be caught. So they kind of moved into our supply chain, and it's that your webinar is combating strategic cargo theft, and that's the networks, the organized rings of criminals. So we'll talk more about that in a minute, because I think a lot of us kind of think, well, this is just guys, opportunistic, just doing this, but this is very organized and it's very dangerous when you think about what they might get at, whether it's drugs or weapons or
Yeah.
Xbox.
Or Nike shoes, or don't take my shoes. Yeah. And what I think is interesting too, you mentioned earlier about whenever I was talking about fraud and then cargo theft, really the fraud, I think kind of how this got so out of control is double brokering, for instance, has always been a thing, like forever and a day. It was back in the day where, my truck broke down, so now I'm having my best friend pick up the load and deliver it. Well, that's technically double brokering, but back in the day it was where these loads would actually get delivered. And it's kind of like, who cares, because the loads get delivered. I don't really care if he's skimming some from the top, whatever.
Hopefully no one gets caught.
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of like whatever. So that's not really even the bad stuff of like that. Yes, that is fraud, but really where it comes in hand, where it's affecting everybody, is when it becomes theft. Where these loads go missing, they don't make it to delivery, they take a couple pallets off, and the receiver has no idea. I mean, that is really where like the theft part of it is what's scary. And I think we use fraud as such a trigger word right now, but it's really the theft part that is such a impact on everyone's pocketbooks.
Yes, and you got involved with this because this is part and parcel of what My Carrier Portal is about, which is get some good partners and keep working with them. We use a lot of automation, and I think we're all for that automation, but it sometimes means we're working with people we don't know. So please elaborate why this is right up your alley at My Career Portal.
Honestly, I'm almost like a nerd with all this fraud stuff, but I love learning about it. But with My Care Portal, it's the way that we give our tools, and every system of vetting and things are a little bit different. But the way that we and our philosophy behind it is we want to give you those red flags to say, not necessarily that, yes, this is for sure a good guy or yes, this is for sure a bad guy, because a lot of it's subjective data. And I don't think it's fair to shut down a carrier just because they just started a business. I don't think that's right. But because they did just start their business, I need to talk to them a little bit further. I need to ask them more questions. We have a VIN verification program. I need to verify they're actually standing there with a truck and this truck does belong to them. Like, I need to do my due diligence, even though I have a red flag, which is, like you said, that takes that human part back into it. Because really it's a combination of, I need tech to help me make this faster. I need my day to go by quicker, but then I also need the human part of it and the vetting. And I think that's where a lot of kind of theft comes in, is where it's, the end of the day on Friday, you're wanting to get out of there and you kind of turn off your human alerts, like you're like, oh, well, I got to get home. My kid's got a baseball game or whatever. And that's where a lot of the theft and stuff can happen. So
Very nice. Very nice. So tell us a little bit about you, Danielle. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined the mothership that is Descartes My Career Portal.
the mothership, I love that. So yeah, I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up there. My parents moved me out when I was about 15. I think I was a sophomore in high school. I lived in Georgia. I bounced around to Florida with my dad, Jack's Beach, and then came back up to Georgia to be with my siblings again. And so kind of everywhere on that sense. And I love to travel now, I think, because of it. So kind of right away when I was a teen mom, or I was 19 when I had my daughter. So as a young mom, kind of had to immediately hustle. I took online college and
That'll make you grow up a little
oh
bit.
yeah, so fast. So, luckily I had that, hunger mentality, I guess. So I bought our first house when I was 20, and just really have been kind of hustling since then. So, worked in telecom stuff for a long time, was in a call center, did that for like 10 years. Then I got into freight. My girlfriend was like, "Oh, you'd love it. There's money in there and all this stuff." Meanwhile, I didn't realize I wouldn't sleep every night, but I guess there's a handoff. So I first did postal freight, which, like I said, I never slept. That was like all the time, having to recover loads, and that was wild. Then I worked for a different brokerage, and I was in like high value copper and electrical wire was kind of my specialty. And that's really where I learned the whole fraud part. I had to really be careful about who was taking my loads. And my boss at the time, she was excellent at teaching me different things. She'd go to these conferences and learn all these different tactics. I got to learn all those things, be front lines on it. And so I was a user of my Care Portal for it was the last 3 years of me being a broker. We switched to that, and what a difference. So because it made such an impact to me, really how I became to work for my Care Portal is I wrote the other sales guy, his name was Mike, on LinkedIn. I'm like, hey, you guys like save my life over here every day. My job is so much easier. And like, I almost had a load stolen, but because of you, it didn't. And thank you so much. And kind of all those things. Kept talking, kept telling him stories of what happened. And basically one day he's like, hey, we got a sales job opening up. You want to come? I'm like, let's go. So that's how I became with my Care Portal. And then like, so with Descartes now. So fun journey.
Yeah, this is a business that attracts the hustlers wherever they are at. They might have been like, oh, I got a degree in English, and realized that wasn't going to be enough. So somehow I became a hustler and got dragged into the logistics biz. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about a little bit about the topic today, which is unpacking cargo theft, trends and solutions. So I want to start with some definitions. So your webinar, which is April 24th, we'll put a link in the show notes. I'll also put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, any other links you give me. You're talking about strategic cargo theft. What is strategic cargo theft, and differentiate that from, I don't know what they call it, more like opportunistic cargo theft?
Yeah, strategic is definitely more where they're hitting kind of all angles of the business. They know exactly what type of carrier to pose as. Maybe they're, posing as that carrier and they like hack into their account. A lot of phishing attempts happen nowadays. They're posing as this carrier, pretending to be them. There's a whole strategy behind it. They're targeting certain brokers that maybe don't have software programs or don't do a good job at vetting, or they're simply hitting them at that 4 p.m. on Friday when they know nobody wants to leave. It's very strategic in their whole process. Not only that, but a lot of times it's from what the California Highway Patrol guys told me, it's the same type of groups, I guess, that they're seeing. Not necessarily like a cartel, that type of thing. I guess there's other type of organizations, and they'll jump into that a lot more. They know a lot more than me on my webinar, but really they're seeing the same people pop up over and over and over again because they're getting arrested. Like they'll find them, they'll steal millions of dollars worth of stuff. They'll find these huge warehouses completely full with stolen freight, maybe like $2 million worth of freight. They get arrested, they get prosecuted, they're in there, they get time for like a year because it's considered property theft, not even retail theft at this point, it's just property theft. And so they'll serve, a couple weeks for get out for good behavior because the prisons are overran, or they're, illegal. They take them out of the country, they just come right back in. So they're seeing the same people kind of over and over again. And that's why I just think it's really important that us as Americans, and it's frustrating too, because like as an American and dealing in logistics, you're like, oh my, why is nobody doing anything about this? Like this is such a problem. It's billions of dollars being stolen every year. Why was this not on the presidential campaign's first thing they talk about? There's enough of us in logistics. So, really, I think that's where we all need to come in and make a change. It's wild. So,
Yep. And I think when we talk about this very big topic, because I've talked to a lot of people about cybersecurity. So we're all concerned about cybersecurity because that could be the ransom attacks. That's people hacking. They are not doing anything typically physical. They want to get into your systems. And they want to hold you ransom, maybe because they're a hacktivist and they want you to divest of this business unit, or they're maybe supported by another country, right? Or they're just looking to make a buck, right? And so there's cybersecurity people, and I feel like freight fraud is very different than that because we're talking about physical stuff, and that's you described earlier. It's happened for a long time in our business. It's just double brokering. I give it to this guy. He doesn't move it himself on his authority. He gives it to somebody else. It still delivers. It's not right that we call it freight fraud, but now we move over here to something I'll call brand new, which is cargo theft, which sometimes is connected to
most of the time, yeah, it's
freight fraud.
yeah, sometimes it's where they're just, hijacking this, but really even like the whole kind of like what we talked about with the carjacking. And for a while it was like that where you'd go to a truck stop, and if you had the right type of freight, they were, following you to a truck stop and, holding you at, gunpoint trying to get your truck. Well, now there are federal it's a felony and they actually do serve time for that. So they've gotten away from that and they've learned, oh well, I can just, like grab a trailer from a guarded lot and just drive off with it. So it's definitely, I think a lot of it is us in the industry. We've kind of overlooked things. We're like, well, it's okay. It turned out okay. And that's kind of where they've learned. They had to have been in the industry prior. They saw all these things and like, hey, we have opportunities that we can infiltrate.
Yeah, Danielle, that's a great point. And I feel like some of this has happened because we are using more and more tools to automate the process. I've been doing this podcast for 7 years. When I started, people started saying, oh, we have a TMS that streamlines the process. And then we started talking about the customer experience, the user experience, where you don't even need to talk to Danielle now. You just go in and go to the portal. And I think those are all wonderful things, but we stopped your broker. You didn't necessarily have to talk to the carriers. And sometimes it was slowing you down. And so I think that we kind of, this is an unintended consequence perhaps of having some automation. By the way, we also started working with the rest of the world. The back offices of freight are done worldwide. That's a wonderful thing. 99.9% of those people who are working
Awesome. Right.
are a huge, huge benefit. But if all of a sudden you're working with a country that you don't go to and they say, you know what, I know how these guys work.
Right. Exactly.
And then
I think that's what happened. Right. I really do. I think that's a lot of it that happened. And it's unfortunate just because other countries are don't have the same things like we do. So they do realize, oh, I want that money. I want this, because they see that it's kind of for the taking because we did not do a good job. And we still definitely have a long ways to go in actually protecting ourselves. So that's why I think having these type of webinars and learning experiences, hopping on your podcast and stuff, it's needed because people don't know what to do. I wouldn't know what to do if I didn't talk to all these people, you know?
Yep. So you showed me some of your materials for your webinar coming up. It's videos of people just. Well, one of them that struck me is a full warehouse, and then even the yard was full. And you go, all of that is stolen, and that guy got 1 year in jail and got out in 4 months. But talk a little bit about how these guys. So I know maybe you touch on a few things. There's some tactics that they're using. They're attacking the rail a lot now. And I think it's one of the reasons they're hitting the rail is because it's wide open spaces. You're not, and they're not necessarily hitting them at the port.
No, they're waiting
where there's people.
Yeah, they're waiting, and then
they're getting it.
I think they're also
middle of nowhere.
like like their whole sheet. To me, there's got to be people that are working with like the rail companies are giving the whole manifest of where is what, because I showed you that video where they're just cutting. They're on these rails, like hopping from thing to thing, cutting them, open them up, and throwing them on the side of the way, and having a car drive up, grab this stuff. Usually it's like shoes or whatever it is. I highly doubt they're throwing TVs off the way, but maybe. And grabbing this freight. And so that's something that our California Highway Patrol, that they have a certain area where there's nothing. It's in the middle of nowhere. There's no lights. There's no cameras. There's nothing there. Why is it still like this? Knowing that it's a hot spot. I asked them why. They're like, well, we need funding. We need to be able to put all this stuff up there, and we're not getting what we need on that front. So it's wild.
So when you think about a truck, most trucks, especially if it's got expensive, high value cargo, if it's drugs or if it's Xboxes or something, I think a lot of those will be, if the driver's not driving it, it is in a lot that has video and probably a locked gate. So we've made it difficult to get at that. The rail is thousands of miles, and some of those are wide open spaces. And so that's just the weak link. And there's not going to be videos everywhere. And, when you told me something also I thought was interesting, you said we use tracking technology devices, but we're using them in a way that can easily be worked around. Please talk about that.
Yeah. So 2 parts. With Descartes, with the MacroPoint part of it, we do tracking for the drivers. Well, we were really reliant on them having their phones with the apps. And kind of really, we've been seeing, there's a couple things on that. We've been seeing that there's stuff being spoofed, things like locations being manipulated. So you as a broker think everything's fine. Luckily, MacroPoint picked out on this. We've been like combating that. That's like our biggest, we have a whole huge division that's literally just attacking that part. But because of that, we've been seeing, well, we really need to be tracking the ELD instead, because this guy can just turn off his tracking on his phone at any time. The ELD part is a little bit more secure. So it's kind of one initiative is tracking the actual truck. Now, I don't think that stops everything. I think you also need tracking on the freight. I think this is where the shippers get involved, because this is part of the loading process. What the California Highway Patrol guys were telling me was that really they would have these tracking devices, but they would set it on the very end of the trailer. The very top of the first pallet you see is right there. So these guys open up the trailer and they're like, oh, this is the device I'm tossing this guy. So having it where these devices need to be more hidden into the trailer, deeper in, even inside of a pallet, it needs to be really in there. Or even if you have 2 of them, have the one that's sitting there where they toss out, oh, I'm good, I don't have to think about it anymore, a second one deeper in. Because once you realize that first one can do the detection of like, hey, the doors are open, there's a light, something's going on here, I'm getting tossed, whatever, they have different mechanism on those tracking. But then the second one will actually stay with the freight, so that way they can go find it. So that's how they are finding these freights the best. It's whenever a shipper, or if you're yourself as a broker, forcing your shipper to do this, those are the ones that they're really able to recover quickly.
Yep. You touched on something I think is very interesting. So when MacroPoint came around, I always remember the first time I heard about it, I was still moving freight. And somebody said, do you guys have MacroPoint? I was like, I don't even know what that is. I looked it up. I was like, oh, yeah, we'll do that. For sure, we'll do that. And it was great. And that MacroPoint at that point was just downloaded onto the driver's phone. And you're like, wow, this is like unbelievable. I was telling my friends, Like, this is an impressive feat. Like, look what we're doing, and to a industry that had typically not embraced every last piece of technology,
Or
it
no
was
tech.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, it was. But I always say the ultimate technology is the truck. So we've always spent big money on that. But that was such a paradigm shift. I mean, it was just fantastic. But you kind of referenced, what if the driver's not in the truck? Okay, I'm tracking that driver. He went fishing today. and, um, so I need the driver to be in the truck for that to work. And so you said now MacroPoint's also capturing ELD. Good, I like it. And then, by the way, some drivers say I'm not downloading anything on my phone. I get that too. Um, but then we also talk about the trailer. Is the trailer attached to the driver and the tractor? And then last but not least, the freight. Is it in that trailer? I mean, we think it is. So we're now trying to make sure that all of these things are all coming together. And I think our data network, I don't know if that's the right word, our visibility is just getting better and better. And I hope and I think the cost of all this technology getting is going lower, and then the sophistication is getting higher. So that'll help with some of this.
And what I'm seeing, I mean, we have a good amount of partners that work with MacroPoint, that we're partnered with, that do the actual cargo part of it, where you just throw the thing in the pallet. They're definitely, those pricing are coming way down. And you're able to even have, because we're partnered with them, you're able to have that as part of your MacroPoint section. So like, yeah, my shipper used blah, blah, blah tracking, and you're able to see it in one platform. And then we do those detections where something happens, you're immediately getting an email or getting an alert in your TMS, depending on how you have it set up. I mean, that's crucial, of course. And then I think even just making your shippers aware, like, for whatever reason, some of them I'm just going to throw Best Buy out there. Best Buy, for instance, they had a huge issue with the BOL manipulation where, I know we talked about this a little bit, where
Yeah, that's an interesting
I know
one.
and this is like the new hot thing that is like running rampant, because this isn't dealt with on any front. Like, my vetting platform doesn't have a way of doing it, but basically they're taking the original BOLs, they pick up a load, and the carrier, by the way, looks awesome. Like, I even had a customer where they used this carrier for over a year, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if he just met the wrong guys at a truck stop, decided to become a bad guy. Who knows what happened? But towards the end of them working with him, they were getting the BOLs and then changing them, taking pallets off of the shipment. Let's say if there's 20 pallets, they took 5 of them off. They would change the BOL so it said that there's only 15 left. And so whenever you're at the receiver, they're like, oh yeah, this IC15, signing off. You're not getting shortages or overages or any type of red flag. So then the broker's just immediately paying the carrier. Oh yeah, these guys are great. They run X amount of loads. And then the receiver does not even notice until they're low on inventory. That's what happened with my customer at Best Buy. It's like months later, and it's like, is that really on the broker because you did not do what you should have done? So like, electronic BOL should be there. That whole thing is wild. And
Well, that's because we have we have those paper BOLs, and
yeah, it's like, we're another technology where, why are we so behind on this? It is blows my mind.
so that reminds me. Years ago, I saw the movie The Irishman, and it was about Jimmy Hoff and the mafia. And I remember, I shouldn't say the mafia. Mafia was involved, but Teamsters was involved, and I don't think this goes on like it did in the past. But um, you're supposed to be delivering 30 sides of beef, and you say, okay, we're just going to take 5 off and sell them to our friends, right? So that's a lot of money we made on the side. And I say, oh, I'm going to slip Danielle $50 because she's going to look the other way and say, yeah, I think we received 30, and I made some money. Everybody down the line was, and if you don't go along with it, perhaps somebody threatens you. So there's always
And that definitely
shortage
could be
and
happening.
lack.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Well, we've seen this at the border where somebody is trying to bring drugs or contraband over the border, and they say, when they get caught, they say, hey, my kids are being held hostage in my hometown 200 miles from here. So there's reasons. I don't think that's the reason it's happening here, but it's gotten more sophisticated. They've figured out what our BOLs are, so they know our business well enough. So they're also, you know, Mr. Naive Joe here. Years ago, I was doing consulting on a project. This is the last consulting engagement I was on, and somebody said this truck was in the parking lot all night with cameras, and we didn't see the theft, and it was locked gate. I was like, but we have a picture of what went in there, and we had a picture when it hit the U.S. border. And I was like, oh, I don't know, it's like 12 hours that it had driven from a factory to the Laredo or Nuevo Laredo. And I remember I said, well, is the seal there? And they go, yeah, the seal's here. I go, well, then nobody opened it. And then somebody said, Joe, you idiot. They take the doors off and keep the seals. And I go, oh my God, how much work is that? He goes, a lot of work. And they had taken, I told you this the other day, took some basically sheet metal. And I was like, what is that sheet metal worth? They're like, probably $20.
Yeah. But they're hoping, rolling the dice on whatever. So
they're hoping that was the Xboxes. They're hoping they're Apple phones or something, right?
right. So and that may be even more like the opportunistic theft too, because they're just hitting whatever. But I think, I mean, like I said, I did high value like copper and electrical wire, and part of the things that we would instruct our drivers, almost as like a scare tactic, I guess too. But like, hey, once you pick up, like, you better go to the bathroom, you better eat before you get picked up, because afterwards you don't stop for 200, 300 miles, because that's when you're getting hit. And the most stuff
Isn't that
happens.
crazy?
It's so
Isn't that
wild. And I
crazy?
think even shippers just, I mean, drivers need to be aware, hey, you are hauling high value freight. So, I mean, there's not every carrier is a bad guy. They're not out there trying to steal it. Things happen to them, but they just need to be aware, hey, be vigilant, because this is what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. And you're putting them in a very difficult situation, because if you say, oh, you can't leave the truck, you're like, as if this job's not hard enough. Now you're telling me don't eat and don't stop.
Right. I can't even go to the
Don't stop.
bathroom. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We wonder why people leave our industry. And anybody who's willing to drive a truck all day long is willing to put a full day's work in. So, but yeah, this is become a bigger problem with and you're going to cover more of the strategic, the gangs that are involved in this, the networks. But we all are dealing with this. And again, whether it's cybersecurity or just what I'll call the double brokering, freight fraud, and now cargo theft outright. And that's happening. I just talked to Ann Renke. She's at IANA, the Intermodal Association North America. They have a big initiative because they feel like, and she's in near Washington, D.C., and she said, we don't seem to see anything from the feds on how to help us. So we're on our own. I think it's going to be associations and companies like Descartes partnering with the California Highway Patrol. No one's going to solve this for us. And by the way, it's also very difficult. So, this is
There's not a silver
insidious.
bullet either. So I think that's maybe why lawmakers have had a hard time, is there's not a silver bullet that is kind of gone so far crazy. But I mean, if you think about it, it was kind of so far crazy with like the mafia back in the day, and they figured that out. I think this is just another ring of crime that they're, kind of left to the side. It's gotten way out of control. But yeah, I mean, we work with FMCSA all the time. We're helping them come up with different ways. Like even the initial setting up as a new carrier, they're having to do facial. They're starting to, hopefully by the end of this year, going to do facial recognition, so you actually know who you're working with, instead of just
Oh, I
people
love
from.
that.
I'm so excited. Instead of just people from like overseas saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a citizen," and blah blah blah, and they don't check anything. So that's. I mean, that's a start, right? I mean, that's how we at least started from the invitation on that end.
Last week, I got a phone call. It was late in the day, like after hours, and some guy called and he said, "Hey, Joe, blah blah blah." And introduced himself, and he said, "I have a whole bunch of shipments that need to move," and it was like, I don't want to say like 75 loads and truckloads. And I said, and he goes, "I don't want to work with a big broker. I want to work with like a small broker carrier." And I go, "Okay." I go, "And it's just the guy." And I introduced him to my friend. And then I was texting my friend. I said, just check their website. And I said, it's not particularly good. It's giving me a feeling that they could be a scam. And so he said, I'll have my guys look into it. And so we were texting over the weekend. He goes, "Dude, they are not smelling quite right over here." And I think, yeah, that's how it happens, because who's not excited as a broker to get 75 loads? and potentially a new customer. And what I was reaching out, what I said to him is, a lot of times when somebody reaches out, it's because there's some broker they didn't pay or some carrier they didn't pay. And then they're like, hey, Danielle, I'd love to work with you. And you're like, oh my God, pennies from heaven. And then you find, oh, whoops, these guys haven't been paying their bills.
I know. I heard a story where it was a fraudster. They had like it was a real shipper. They've updated their website and changed all their contact information to them though. And so then they pretended to be the shipper. Then they pretended to be they gave it to a broker. They pretended to be the carrier, acting like they pretend picked up this magical load, made fake bills, turned that in. So they were getting paid by this broker on loads that didn't even happen by a shipper that doesn't exist. That was like one of the craziest things I've ever heard. And it's like, how do you even stop that? And those are one of the things where those relationships, you got to go to the shipper, meet your customer. And a lot of that, I don't think we have that relationship mindset anymore. And I think that's kind of why this is happening.
I'm going to plug my buddies over at the Broker Carrier Summit. It's coming up here April 28th through the May 2nd. It's in Indianapolis. Okay, good. Oh, that's fantastic. But what they're trying to do is get some of these relationships. Nobody wants to leave the technology, the automation, and that streamlines everything. We don't want to leave that, but we have to somehow make time for relationships, because you're not being defrauded by the guy who you've been working with for the last 5 years. Being defrauded by the guy who's doesn't have a website, or it looks sketchy, or he doesn't want to talk on the phone. He only wants to text.
Something's always usually off. Yeah.
Our spidey senses have to be better when you say, oh, this guy's ridiculously cheap. That's why I'm working with him. We're going to make a ton of money. No, you're not.
Yeah, right. Something is off for sure.
So in terms of the solutions, you told me we got to do better with our devices and tracking. You also, this is really what you do over at My Carrier Portal. We also have to do better with vetting. Talk about how that vetting helps prevent this problem.
Yeah. Now, I know people and back in the day, I had my own checklist. Like I did everything manual. I had my little sheet of paper that was on my computer. I had to do all these certain things, check this, call this number, verify this, all these things, talk to the insurance company before I even was able to send the PDF packet. That took forever. And it's important to do all those things. I don't think the human element of that should be taken away, but you need something that just gives you the red flag. So that's what we do. You customize, hey, because I haul high value freight, high risk freight, I need to have certain parameters on my carriers. And with those parameters, like let's say they need to be in business for my own company, we did need to be in business for a year. They need to have 5 truck minimum. They need to have 200,000 on insurance. They need to have an A rating on that insurance. Just some of the things, not have any red flags. Their safety rating needs to be good. Kind of like the perfect, I need to find a gem, but they're hauling high value freight. So then I have to pay them more, that type of stuff too. But having My Carrier Portal makes it where you can quickly see whatever's not meeting your standard. And sometimes it's where it's a large company. And let's say, like one of my favorite guys, and I use them all the time whenever I do like a demo, is, and they're like my core guys back in the day, but they have like 40 people blocking them. And that's a lot of people saying, hey, I'll never work with these guys under any circumstance. But if you look into them further, they got over 200 trucks. They've been in business for 10 years. You can even see like the tracking data through MacroPoint now through My Carrier Portal. So you can see they've tracked 3,400 times in the past 6 months. Like they're moving a lot of freight. So yeah, they're bound to make people mad. Things happen in trucking. That's what happens. But I have all that information ahead of me so I can make like an educated decision whenever I'm vetting somebody. And then on top of that, I think where a lot of the fraud, the theft, that type of thing comes in is those phishing attempts, people pretending to be a carrier. You'll see like the email will have like an L instead of an I or whatever, leave an S off here or whatever. And so with our stuff, in order for them to even finish your packet, they have to be verified by us. They do a 2-factor login to fill out the packet. So just that extra layer of like, oh, this is going to be a little bit harder for me to fill out this packet. Let's try to find another guy who's not as smart and doesn't have a vetting service. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
So I know another element of your webinar is going to be about the process for recovery. And you said to me that a lot of these companies, they get defrauded, or I should say cargo theft, they just kind of file a claim and walk away. They don't talk to the police. And we have law enforcement now aware, and they have task force. And so you have to tell them and get them involved and not just say, I don't have time. So please elaborate on that.
Yeah, and I think even we don't have time, but also I think they're embarrassed. I think they're like, "Oh, this happened to me. I don't want my shipper to know, or my other shipper that didn't happen to. I don't want them to know, thinking that I'm bad." Really, honestly, this is happening to everybody. So like those times of like, "Oh, I want to hide because it makes me look bad," are kind of out the window now. I think in order to combat that, you need to have a good sense of like your guidelines in place so you can go back to your shipper. Hey, I just want to let you know this happened to me, but this is what we're doing to improve on it. So outside of that, I think really I think another reason why people didn't call the police departments is because I remember calling on a stolen load, and you would say, yeah, it got stolen here. And they're like, well, where is the truck now? And you're like, well, they're tracking here. And they're like, well, call them. I'm like, I can't call every single place that they're driving through. Like, what? So I think and that's something like the California Highway Patrol guys and I talked about for a long time. I'm like, why do these guys not know? Why can they not help me? Why do they just shove me off? And I went to Matt's and I talked to the Kentucky State Patrol, and they even said, yeah, a lot of times I just say, yeah, call someone else. And I'm like, why do you do that? And they're like, well, I don't know what to do. So
Right. That's true of some of the um, there's these groups that are stealing identities, and it's happening kind of on a global level. And so if you call your local police force and say, hey, they're pretending to be me online, and they're like, I'm not the internet police, like that. And we in some ways have to help law enforcement and feds. I think this is going to be solved by the community, our associations. It's because it is difficult and it's hard to get the police involved. So I think we're going to, have, a lot of ways, just have to figure it out ourselves. But it anything that hits on a global level, when you call your local police station, they're like, "What the hell do you want me to do
right.
about it?"
Yeah. I'm in my small little town with one stoplight. They're like, I can't do anything. But even they will talk about when you do talk to the police and you're making that initial report, like what are things that you should say? Like one thing, for instance, they told me is don't say, I think it got stolen. You don't know if it did or if it didn't, but you need to be like, this got stolen. This is what happened. Like you need to be very definite, because that wishy-washy stuff, the police are like, oh, it's not even worth my time looking into. They don't even know. So I think even just that piece alone is enough where I didn't know that. I would have been like, well, maybe like they're tracking, but they're not answering. And I don't know. Now they're off course. Like maybe something's wrong with their phone. And the guys are like, well, you don't even know what's happening. I'm not even going to take you serious. So that right there, I think, is some advice that everybody should take if this happens to you. Hopefully it doesn't, but at least knowing what to do afterwards. So
Yeah, and I went to the Trimble conference last year. I'm going to go again this year, and they make the technology, the tech stack for the drivers, and they have a transportation management system. They have a whole bunch of stuff similar to what Descartes has, but Descartes not as much inside the truck. And I remember talking to a guy there, and he was selling gas cards. That was their business. And I said, "Why are you here at the Trimble event?" And he said, "We're a Trimble partner." And he said, when somebody's trying to fill up their tank or wants to use that card, filling up a tank for a truck is very expensive. He said, if they're trying to fill that tank in California, but I know that truck is in Florida, we're not going to allow the charge. He says, because we can connect the card to the truck. And I was thinking, that's what the tech companies can do for us. So when somebody says, oh, we're based in Illinois, all of our trucks are in Illinois, and you say, okay, can I see any? No, I'm not seeing any trucks for you in Illinois. That I think we're going to very quickly get to the place where we're able to say, I know who those guys are. And by the way, it's going to have to be a permission-based thing where you say, I have 200 trucks and I'll let you into our system so you can see where all 200 trucks are. You'll see 20 in our terminal today and 180 across the country. I think that's when we'll get even better at this, as soon as we can get.
Which is going to be hard for drivers to adapt, though, because even that, they're like Big Brother. Like it was hard for them to do macro point on their phone, let alone watch every single thing I do in a car. I don't know. There's it's going to be really hard to. Yes, I think they understand it's important, but then also they're like, Yeah, but then they can see literally everything I do. It's like an episode of Black Mirror. It's like I don't want them to see everything. So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be interesting.
I this is way off topic, but I'll say it anyway. Remember that horrible murder that we saw in Idaho with that guy who killed the college students? I was watching, I don't know why I watch these stupid crime things. They make me sick, but I watch them. And I heard somebody say, a lawyer actually, she said, it's harder and harder to get away with these crimes because we have mobile phones, we have cameras everywhere, and we have DNA. And she said, and those things make it really hard. She said, we don't think we'll see serial murders to the same extent that we have in the past because somebody's going to be able to find you through one of these things. And I think that's the same kind of thing. That technology in our space is going to combat this. Not happened just yet, but I think it's through the efforts of people like you and the chips that's going to happen.
Have you ever heard of the software GenLogs? Yeah, so they do what they're doing like blows my mind, but they have like their own camera set up around the US. They're like a pretty big percentage now. And they were telling me a story about how they were on the phone with a shipper and they're like, yeah, we had this load stolen. It's this carrier. Like we have no idea where they are. They turned off all their tracking and they were like, oh, what's the carrier? Blah, blah, blah. Looked them up. And then like right then and there, they found the stolen load. They were able to get it. Like
Oh, that's
the
crazy.
craziest stuff, but like that alone, like it wasn't even. Whenever I first met them, I'm like, so are you in all the traffic cameras? Like, what are you doing? Like, no, we have our own cameras up there. Like just stuff like that is so revolutionary and like outside of the box, but still kind of bringing everybody in together to combat this. So I think you're right. Tech will be the one that solves this, but I think it still has to be that human element of like protection
We
events.
got to get that last mile. We got to get that last mile of tech connected because we just began this journey and remember how excited I was not so long ago. Just that, oh, I got macro point. It's going to track my truck from here to there. And that was one or two trucks that were high value for one customer. And now it's like, oh, come on. Now you see Descartes has all of these techs. And I think that's where the big companies are valuable because they're going to be able to connect the digital dots.
Yeah, that's definitely where we're at here because even bringing in macro point data into my care portal and you can see like let's say because for a while it was where like if a carrier had no inspections that was a red flag, they're bad. How do they have no inspections that they've been running for a year? And then now DOT is like, oh, I'm only pulling people over if they look like their hood's flying off. Like this is a safety concern, that's when I'm pulling over doing that. So the good guys aren't getting inspected, so that's why we started pulling in the macro point data so you can see, yeah, this guy's tracked, like I said, that one carrier 3,400 loads in 6 months. Clearly they're running. Just because they're not getting pulled over, they probably have good equipment. That's why they're not getting pulled over. But you can see, so even that piece coming together, that tech talking to each other, it's so cool. I'm so excited for what's coming. I can't wait.
I love it. I love it. So I'm going to summarize what we talked about. Then I want to get your final thoughts on the topic. So I'm talking to my friend Danielle Spinelli, and we're talking about unpacking cargo theft, trends and solutions. And you guys have a conference coming up here, not conference, webinar, Combating Strategic Cargo Theft Stories from the CHP. And that is April 24th. We'll put a link to that. And if somebody's listening after April 24th, please get me the video of that so we can embed it in the show notes so people who are listening after April 24th can check it out. I'm sure that'll be on your website too. And I'll also put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, and any of the links you give me. So definitely want to get to that conference if you're listening before April 24th. And so we're talking about cargo theft, and we talked about a little bit of the differences. There is cybersecurity, which is different, maybe first cousins to this cargo theft. The cargo theft is a little different than freight fraud. Freight fraud sometimes still gets your load delivered. Cargo theft is stealing, and it's not just stealing from the trucking companies and the trailers. They're stealing trailers. They're opening up trailers by taking the doors off. They're cutting open the sides of rail cars and of trucks, trailers. This has become a bigger and bigger problem. It's gangs now. That's why your conference or your webinar focuses in on the strategic nature. These are networks of criminals. And there are some tactics that they're using a lot. They're manipulating BOLs. They're impersonating. They're doing phishing attacks, getting our emails. They're getting into our systems. Um, and the solutions to this, we just talked a little bit about, is you got to get to know the people you're working with. So you want to use a tool like My Carrier Portal to actually vet the people you're working with. You also want to use all the tracking and all the technologies that we have at hand, and don't put it on top of the freight where the criminals can just pull it off. You gotta hide it. We got to be a little more creative um, about our tracking, because they're getting more sophisticated. So we have to get more sophisticated. By the way, I also have talked to people. I think I talked to the guys over at Bloodhound Tracking. They have um, they have sensors that they've disguised inside of containers. So even when a criminal is in there, but I hope no criminals are listening to my podcast. But if they are,
Just
there
giving all the
are.
secret sauce out. Jeez.
I know,
No.
but they're. I think that's what we need to do. We have to be a lot more creative, because the criminals are getting more sophisticated.
Right. I know I need to talk to those Blue Hound guys. What you told me, it's really cool.
Bloodhound,
Bloodhound, excuse me. Bloodhound.
and they're yeah. I'll introduce you. So and we got to do better with our tracking. We got to do better with our vetting, and then we have to involve law enforcement. They are aware of this problem, and we need to let them know. And by the way, we didn't necessarily talk about it, but I think California, and you showed this in your webinar, 75% of this problem is in California, and it's a huge attack vector. Obviously, we have Long Beach and LA, and we have probably thousands of miles of rail out there. So California is a country of its own, and but it is happening everywhere. So I don't think any of us can be hiding from it. Anyway, Danielle, put a big old bow on this one. Final thoughts on the topic.
Final thoughts. Honestly, like reason why I even called you is I'm so excited about this webinar, and I really want. It's not really about my product. It's not really about Descartes. It's not really about that. It's industry information. I think everybody needs to know what's going on, and hearing as soon as I talk to these guys, hearing their stories, hearing what they're doing, kind of give me a lot more confidence in. Okay, they are aware, because like I told you, I'm calling the police departments and getting shoved around is so discouraging, and it's so like nobody even cares. Like I'll just file my claim, or I'll just write this check to my customer so I don't lose them and just forget about it. And that's not how we're ever going to stop this, or even put a duct tape hole, on this hole or whatever. Like we need something to kind of all work together. So very passionate about kind of all working together to stop this on multiple fronts. I love to hear stories. So even if you don't watch the webinar, you've had something happen to me. I know you'll put my information on there, but hit me up. This is how I learn. This is how I'm able to get tech to get better about things. I can, find different techs that can help you. I love hearing all these type of stories. So that's, I guess, my little plug on it.
Yep. Yep. And you're doing this with TIA. So they want to know, they recognize this is a huge problem. I just mentioned Intermodal Association of North America, and Ann Renke, she was just on my podcast. They have an initiative to chase this down. So I think we have to bubble all of our concerns and all of our stories, as you said, to our institutions, to our associations, because if you don't talk about it because it's embarrassing or you're busy, then no one can learn from your
Yeah, exactly.
horrible story. So anyway, Danielle, thank you so much. I normally ask people what conferences they're going to. You already told me you're going to be at the Broker Carrier Summit. So why is Broker Carrier Summit so important to you and My Carrier Portal?
Yeah, we're actually sponsoring the whole tech track. Wanted to do the fraud one, but we didn't make it in time. But no, I've been now, this will be my fourth or third time, I think. And I love the fact that you can meet carriers. I'm like almost front lines working with everybody again. So I'm hearing stories about fraud here and there. I'm learning, because we're doing the tech track too. One of the things we're doing there is what tech do you really actually need? How do you find tech that doesn't overlap? If you're just starting out, what kind of tech versus I've been in business for 20 years, what kind of tech do I need? And so I think, like we said, tech's going to help a lot, but I think also knowing like the human element. So that's kind of what we're there talking about. But Broker Carrier Summit, I love, because I go to a ton. I think I'm going to 12 conferences this year. I love
Oh my
it's
God.
insane. I love working the booths. I love talking to people that way.
Well, you got teenagers at home, so it's
Yeah,
an
so
excuse
they're
to get away
right,
from them.
exactly. They're a nightmare. No, just kidding. But no, so like this is one that I don't have to feel like a mall kiosk person and have a booth and like, hey, will you buy my product? It's not. It's just really building relationships with customers, and I love that. I love talking to people.
Yeah, I spoke to Dan Lindsay not so long ago. I'll put a link to that episode in. Dan Lindsay's the founder of the Broker Carrier Summit, and when I talked to him about the conference, I told him, I said, you know what, you might be the founder, but it feels like everybody who goes feels a sense of ownership. I've never attended, but I've talked to those people. I'm going to try and get
You
to
gotta
this one this
go.
year.
You gotta go. They're cute.
I'm signed up. I've got my
Good.
registration
You'll
already.
see me there then.
So
Fun.
yeah. Well, it's off Indianapolis, only 5 hours from Detroit, area where I live. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see you there then.
Yeah, and I said this to some of the people who are the techies who are going to go there. Like, I talked to Dawn Salvucci-Favier, and by the way, she's my third cousin. We found
no
out we're
way.
related on Ancestry.
Oh, that's wild.
I've known her for years, yeah. And I talked to the Revenova guys, and I said, we have created all of this technology that lets us automate, and we're very excited about that. But that has kind of taken away some of the human element. And so the Broker Carrier Summit is putting that back. And I think that's just a very worthy thing. And I always use the term othering when I talk about Broker Carrier Summit. You can always talk about the others, the other guys who don't do it right, the truckers in the broker's case and the brokers in the trucking case. When you get there and you break bread and talk to them, you start to realize they're just people
Regular
just like
people.
you and I.
Right, exactly. And I love that the tech companies go there too, because you kind of get to refuel that and take yourself out of your own tech. I think that's one thing that I love that we do too. Is like, because we go, I'm able to force myself out of being in a tech space and think of like, oh, these are actual people dealing with these issues. So I love that. I love that summit. It's one of my favorites.
Well, one last time, combating strategic cargo theft, stories from the California Highway Patrol. That is a webinar, April 24th. I'll put a link in the show notes. Danielle, thank you so much for doing this webinar, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about it today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate, getting this on your network. I think this is just so important. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.